Hello there guys, you're listening to Ebird Online and I'm back with another review, and today we're going to be talking about Elizabeth and Andrei. So this is 90 Day Fiance, Happily Ever After Season 5, Episode 10, Drawing the Line. And today we're going to be discussing if Andrei's violent reaction to Chuck and Charlie questioning his friends was warranted. And just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, please just click that big red button and subscribe to my channel. Make Ebird a very happy Ebird. And if you enjoy the video, please don't forget to smash the like button. And so without further ado, I give you Elizabeth and Andrei. So we catch up with this couple and Elizabeth and Andrei are walking through the park, and Elizabeth says she doesn't know how the argument started last night. I can let you know. Your dad and your brother incessantly asked Andrei's brothers and friends for details about Andrei's previous life. They insinuated both that he was dodgy and he'd married you for a green card. On the other side, Andrei was spectacularly unwilling to tell them anything about himself, and he also instructed his friends and his family not to sell him out. Chuck and Andrei pressed on and on, asking the same question 5 to 10 times, at which point your husband Andrei quite literally flipped his lid. He challenged Chuck to a fight, they tussled like a pair of girls and came absolutely nowhere near a fight, and then Andrei stormed out. With you, Elizabeth, that's what happened last night, it's not that difficult. And then Elizabeth tells us that she's spoken to her family and they're upset and disappointed. I'd like to offer a couple of more adjectives: pissed off and unsurprised. Elizabeth then instructs Andrei to apologise to her dad and brother. And so guys, I'm reading the body language of Andrei as he skulks through this park, and somehow I just don't think Andrei's got the gait of an apologiser. Andrei's sorry ass looks everything but sorry. And so Libby said to Andrei, "What have you got to say for yourself?" And Andrei said, "Sorry, Lib." And she said, "Sorry, Lib? Is that all? After everything that happened?" And guys, sorry, Lib was the equivalent to Sozza, i.e. I'm nowhere near as apologetic as a full sorry. And she said, "I've never seen you act that way. I've never seen that enraged look in your eyes." And she said, "What happened?" And he said, "Well, they were making jokes and then all the attention was on me and I got really offended. I just couldn't hold myself back from saying something." And so I don't know what your take on things is. My take is this: Chuck and Charlie went way too far with his family and his friends. They not only questioned his friends, but they called his character up for public appraisal. That was wrong. However, there's never a reason to say, pack your bags and go. There's never a reason to say, outside, let's fight right now. And there's never a reason to tell your father-in-law to F off. I'm fairly sure there's another way that Andrei could have closed these two down without resorting to the lengths that he went to. And in the absolute understatement of the century, Andrei said, I think I did too much. Do you think? But it's kind of getting on my nerves a little bit, the fact that Elizabeth doesn't see anything that her dad and brother did. She keeps saying to Andrei, "What would make you flip like that? What would make you do that?" Public ridicule, Elizabeth. Public ridicule. And guys, between you and me, the fact that where Charlie and Chuck were headed, i.e. something happened when he was in the police to get him kicked out and he moved to Ireland, did seem to have him completely rattled. I definitely think there's something in it. And Elizabeth said, "I am not even allowed to swear in front of your mum and dad, whether in English or in Romanian. How would you feel if I spoke to your mum and dad the way that you spoke to my dad and brother?" And finally the penny drops and Andrei said, "Yeah, you're right, I went too over the top, I was drunk, I shouldn't have said what I said, I'm going to speak to Chuck and I'm going to apologise, but with Charlie, I'll only apologise to him if he apologises to me." Now I will say one thing, Andrei went way over the top, there's no getting away from that. But Charlie turned up in Moldova in the first instance, as if he were looking for trouble. And of course, when you're looking for it, it ain't too hard to find. It's almost as if the sole reason that he went to Moldova was not to enjoy his wedding, but to catch Andrei out. And Andrei's main problem is that Charlie insinuated he only came to America for the green card. And he said to put me in the category of people that would fraud somebody like this is disgusting. Okay, so let's pick this apart for a moment. He was already in Ireland, so he was already in a first world country with plenty of opportunity. The second point I want to make is that he and Elizabeth, I think, are quite equal to each other in terms of age, in terms of looks. Thirdly, he's not only married Elizabeth, but he's had a kid with her. So ostensibly what Charlie is saying is, you're prepared to actually have a child with somebody that you don't even particularly like just for a green card. Yeah, if it wasn't true, I would be mightily pissed off as well. Don't get me wrong, I'm no Andrei fan. I think he's very brusque and abrupt and rude. But there was literally nothing to stop them staying in Ireland. And the truth be told, once you've got an Irish passport, which you do I think after about 4 years, you've then got access to the whole of Europe, which is 26 different countries from the EU. Sorry, 25. Go on you Brexiteers. So yeah, I understand his ire at this statement, but like I said earlier, there's no need for an offer of immediate violence. And so Elizabeth then tells Andrei, I'm not going to get married unless you sort this out with Chuck and Charlie. Yet, that's the echo of her hollow threats. But then Andrei says, well, you ring your dad and your brother and see what's up and I'll go over and sort it out. And she said, I'm not going to mediate. Why don't you want to sort it? And he said, well, I might make things worse if I go over there right now. I'm still angry. No, Andrei, more like you don't want to make the first move because you look like a little pussy boy. Later on that day, surprise, surprise, Elizabeth has acquiesced and she's decided to visit Chuck and Charlie at their Airbnb in order to smooth things over. She tells us she feels really embarrassed and she doesn't know where to begin. I know, with a large glass of red wine. That's where the Ebird always starts, when she's got a very sticky situation. Or even when she's got just a sticky situation. Or even, in fact, with no situation at all. Most of the time I enjoy a large glass of red wine. Elizabeth tells Chuck Andrei didn't want to come over because Charlie might still be upset and he might make things worse. And then Chuck says, in all the 2 years he's been around my family, I've never heard him be so disrespectful. I've never seen that side of Andrei. Elizabeth tells them both, yes, Andrei was really out of order, but you guys aren't blameless. You were both cussing and Charlie, you told him to F you. And Charlie said, well, he said it first. And then he said, when he comes over, I'm going to expect an apology and I'm not going to back down. And then Charlie said if he wants to get physical, he can. All his friends in Moldova might be scared of him, but not me. And Charlie keeps on ramming home the point that he's not scared of Andrei. Maybe his friends in Moldova are scared of him, but I'm not scared. Charlie tells us he doesn't know the meaning of the word fear. But then again, he doesn't know the meaning of most words. He's not the brightest spark. And for what it's worth, I think you're scared of Andrei. I really do. But it seems, finally, the penny's dropped. Elizabeth says to production, ever since we've been in Moldova, Andrei's been really on edge. I wonder what it can be. Elizabeth, do you not think it could be his past? And then Chuck laid down the law. He said unless we get a full apology and some sort of explanation, I'm not going to the wedding, and more importantly, I'm not paying for the wedding. Elizabeth's worried at this prospect, and she's right to be. She said in the whole of their relationship, Andrei has never given her a sincere apology, and she doesn't know if he's even capable. But we find out soon enough, because Andrei, Chuck and Charlie all meet in a park. Andrei tried to give them both a fist bump, and they both refused. And Chuck asked him, what have you got to say for yourself? And Andrei seemed deep in thought. It was unfamiliar territory. And Andrei, hands in pockets, said, it was all because of the alcohol. I woke up this morning and I realised that I effed things up. And Chuck said, do you feel like that you should apologise? And Andrei did not want to apologise. He danced around the question and then he said, I spoke this morning with Elizabeth and I squared things up with her and she said come down and speak to your dad and Charlie so we can sort out what's what. Oh, Andrei, we'll take that as a no then. You don't want to apologise. And unsurprisingly, Chuck said, I have a problem with that. You shouldn't just apologise just because Elizabeth told you to. And finally, and very begrudgingly, Andrei said, I'd like you to stay in Moldova. I'd like us to sort things out, and I'm sorry. And whilst it was an apology of the Soza variety, it was nevertheless an apology. But straight after his apology, he said, I'm doing this for Elizabeth. Andrei, are you sorry or aren't you? And Chuck's got his own theory. He says, I know why you're doing this. It's just so that I'll pay for everything. You're only doing it for the money. I came to Moldova, you cussed me out in front of your friends, and now you're just scared that I'll cancel the wedding. And Chuck's on the money there because even to production earlier, Andrei said, I've got a wedding coming up and I want to make sure that everything's smoothed out. Andrei, you haven't got a wedding coming up. Not if Chuck withdraws funding. What do you think you're going to do? Wind your watch back 30 years and have it at your parents' apartment? You don't have the funds for the kind of wedding that you want, and with no apology there's no wedding, and you know it. Then Chuck said, what about Charlie? And Andrei said, Elizabeth and I both agree that Charlie and I were both 50-50 at fault. And the Ebird thinks it's more like 60-40, with Andrei being slightly more at fault. But Charlie really was very aggressive that night. Charlie, as far as I'm concerned, is the reason that God created a middle finger. He's not a likeable person. But Chuck's not happy with this. He said, I was hoping you weren't going to do this. I was hoping you were going to take full responsibility. So in the end, Chuck said, I'm not convinced. Let's take things day by day and we'll see how you behave getting towards the wedding. The truth be told, I think you've just come here, told us a few things so the wedding's back on. Chuck, of course he has. He has no respect for you and he has no respect for your daughter. Let's not forget that just a few days ago, he tricked your daughter into changing her religion. And that's everything for this week. Guys, let me know what you think down below. Do you think Charlie and Andrei were both complicit? And should Andrei have apologised? Do you think Elizabeth, as usual, is covering for him? I know I do. He tells me everything about his past. Elizabeth, you know nothing about his past and you know it. This has just piqued your interest. But knowing you, you'll go no further with your investigations. But the $64 million question is, why do we think Andrei left Moldova? Personally, I think for one reason or another, he got fired from the police. I think he was so embarrassed that he left to go and be a bouncer in Ireland. That way I think he could maintain his bravado as this big shot. So let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you very soon. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter at Ebird99. You've been listening to Ebird Online. Ciao for now.